New World Order. You've definitely heard that phrase before, right? For some people, it brings to mind, world leaders talking about a new age of global cooperation. But for others, it conjures up these images of shadowy figures pulling all the strings from behind a curtain. Well, let's get into it, because the reality might be a whole lot less about secret handshakes and a lot more about public documents that are hiding in plain sight. So what are we actually talking about here? Is the New World Order some kind of hidden plot by a secret group? Or is it an open, publicly stated agenda being pushed by some of the most powerful organizations in the world? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the actual documents, the official plans that are actively shaping our world as we speak. Yeah, our whole mission here is to get past the whole conspiracy versus coincidence debate. We're just going to take a neutral look at the actual policy papers, the treaties, and the economic plans coming from groups like the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. We want to understand the future they are building, in their own words. So here's our game plan. First, we'll break down the fundamental shift in power that's going on. Then we'll dive into the new architecture for how the world is governed. After that, we'll tackle the plan to reset the economy and see how policies on climate, food, and borders all plug into the system. And finally, we'll look at the technology that could enforce it all and the two very, very different futures we're facing. Okay, so here's the most important thing to grasp. We are smack in the middle of a documented shift in how the world is run. It's a deliberate move away from the old system, where individual countries called the shots, toward a brand new model of shared global governance. So let's break down what that really means. Okay, so on the left you've got the world we're used to, intergovernmentalism. Think of the classic UN, where different countries send the representatives and they hash things out. But on the right, you see the new model they're pushing, multi-stakeholderism. Now this is a game changer. Governance is no longer just for governments. Suddenly, huge multinational corporations, powerful NGOs, and other unelected groups get a seat right at the decision-making table. Critics have literally called this a corporate coup d'etat, because it kind of replaces democratic accountability with whatever's decided in a boardroom. So how do they actually build this new model? Well, it's not happening overnight. It's being constructed piece by piece through global initiatives and treaties that create a whole new architecture for making decisions, especially when a crisis hits. Now this right here, this is a big one. It's the UN's proposed emergency platform. And here's the playbook. First, someone declares a complex global shock. And what counts as a shock? Well, that's the thing. The definition is super broad. It could be a pandemic, a climate disaster, a huge cyber attack, anything really. Then, the UN Secretary General can pull together all the key global players, we're talking corporations, international banks, you name it, to coordinate a response. The huge concern here is that this could let an unelected global body just step in and override national governments whenever there's a crisis. And you can see this exact tension playing out with the proposed WHO pandemic agreement. Look, supporters will tell you that a centralized response is the only way to prevent chaos and make sure resources get to everyone in the next pandemic. That's the pro-argument. But critics are sounding the alarm. They're worried that a one-size-fits-all plan from Geneva is a terrible idea, that sharing all that data creates a global surveillance system, and that the enforcement part, with potential sanctions, is a direct attack on a country's right to make its own decisions. Now, this shift in who's in charge goes hand in hand with a massive proposed shift in our economy. You've probably heard of it, it's called the Great Reset. And at its very heart is a move away from a world where we own things to a world of usership. And this quote, wow. This is from an essay the World Economic Forum published back in 2016, and it set the internet on fire. Now, the WEF has since said, hey, it was just a thought experiment, not a policy goal, but it perfectly captured this vision of a future where you don't actually own things, you just access them. So the engine behind this is a model called Product as a Service, or PaaS. Think about it. Instead of buying a car, you just subscribe to a mobility service. Instead of buying a fancy washing machine, you just pay per load of laundry. The company owns the product forever, and you just pay a fee to use it. So what's the trade-off? Well, the people who support this say it's fantastic for the planet because it forces companies to build things that last. And for you, the consumer, you get the latest stuff without any of the headaches of repairs. But critics see a much darker picture. They see a future where nobody can build wealth by owning assets, creating a new kind of techno-feudalism. And for any of this to work, these companies have to constantly monitor their products, which means your car, your appliances, your whole life becomes a fire hose of data. So you might be asking yourself, how on earth do you get an entire society to go along with such a radical change? Well, the documents we're looking at suggest there are three main levers to pull to make it happen: climate, food, and borders. These aren't seen as separate issues, but as powerful tools to reshape everything. The massive push for net zero emissions is a huge driver. It's already changing our energy systems and leading to something called greenflation, basically prices going up because of these new green policies. This plugs right into this really controversial idea of degrowth, which is a planned shrinking of Western economies. You can see it in farming, where new rules about things like nitrogen fertilizers, all to meet climate targets, led to those huge farmer protests in the Netherlands. They were afraid of being put out of business. That's a real-world clash right there. And then you've got the UN's Global Compact for Migration. Now, they say it's non-binding, but its goals are incredibly influential. Critics zoom in on Objective 17. It asks countries to shape the public conversation by punishing what it calls hate speech, and to cut funding to media outlets that promote what it calls intolerance. To the critics, this isn't about promoting civility. They see it as a blueprint to manage public opinion and basically censor any real political debate on a critical issue. Okay, so you've got this new global system, this new economy, but how do you make sure everyone actually complies? Well, that brings us to the enforcement layer, the digital tools that could make this whole thing mandatory. So, let me introduce you to the Central Bank Digital Currency, or CBDC. And let's be clear, this is not like Bitcoin, and it's not like using your credit card. This is digital money created and controlled directly by the government's central bank, and it has two features that make it a total departure from the cash in your wallet. Number one, it is not anonymous, and number two, it can be programmed. So what can programmable money actually do? Well, this is where things get quite wild. A government could put an expiration date on your money to force you to spend it. They could block you from buying certain things. Say, you've used up your carbon allowance, so no more gas for you. Every single thing you buy would be logged on a permanent government record. Honestly, this technology raises some of the biggest questions about freedom and privacy we have ever faced. And here's where it all clicks together. When you combine a CBDC with a universal digital ID, you create an unbelievably powerful system for social control. Your ability to do basic things, use your bank account, travel, maybe even buy groceries, could all be tied to whether or not you're complying with government rules. We all saw a test run of this with the vaccine passports, where your access to everyday life was literally tied to your digital health status. Okay, let's pull all these threads together now. What we've been looking at isn't just a bunch of separate policies. It's a fully integrated agenda. And depending on how you look at it, it leads to one of two completely different futures. On the one hand, you have the vision of a globalist utopia. This is the official story, right? A world that's safe, sustainable, and super efficient, all managed by experts to solve massive problems like climate change and pandemics. Sounds pretty good. But on the other hand, you have the fear of a sovereignist dystopia. This is the nightmare scenario, a future of techno-feudalism, where individual freedom and democracy are things of the past, sacrifice for top-down control that turns us all into dependent serfs with no real rights. When you boil it all down, every single one of these documents and proposals comes back to this one fundamental question. It is the trade-off that's at the very heart of this entire debate. This new world is being built around us right now, and understanding what's at stake has never been more critical. How much of our liberty, both as individuals and as nations, are we willing to trade away for the promise of security? The answer we come up with is going to define the world for generations.
For the full text and references to this topic, refer to the link in the description. This is Chloe. See you next time.